Hi, everybody. Dr. Dan Lawrence here. We're going to talk about artificial intelligence. And this video in particular, I want to just talk about the fundamentals of prompt engineering. So, really introductory level concepts here just to get us acquainted with using some artificial intelligence tools. And some of you have used them and are already digging into them, and some people are coming in totally new. So I'm kind of thinking from that perspective of someone who hasn't touched any of these things before. Some real as a place to start. I think the historical element is interesting. That for thousands of years, philosophers and thinkers and humans have questioned our relationship with technology. I mean, I track that back to Plato, at least, 2400 years ago, the famous dialogue Phaedrus, where Socrates, as a character in that dialogue, is basically saying, he's really grumpy about this newfangled writing or this newfangled technology of writing. Writing was at that point a new technology, if you can imagine. At some point, it was not common for people to encode their thoughts or their words in symbols on papyrus or stone tablets or what have you. That must have been kind of mind blowing for ancient people, right? Like almost a kind of right. You can imagine people being skeptical about, well, what are the implications of this? Anyway, humans have been questioning the relationship with technology, and I think that's a good thing for a very long time. And artificial intelligence is no different, in that we're seeing a lot of potential use cases and a lot of potential dangers to it as well. So just to, the reason why I think that the AI chatbot tools have come into public attention recently is from some clever marketing from OpenAI, which is the company that released ChatGPT. That was like November 2022, and it it is a phenomenon. I mean, there are markers here. ChatGPT became the fastest growing software application of all time, according to a Reuters report. So very quickly grew to more than 100 million users who were uh, actively inputting information into that program. So one of the fastest growing software application of all time to date, as of recording this video. So that's interesting. Quick adoption of a technology without much. The faster the adoption of the technology, the less opportunity there is to critique it, right? Um, and then at the same time, I think that AI crossed a threshold into which it's minimally viable. It's an MVP, a minimally viable product. It just barely was ready for release. I actually think that the technology companies were a little bit quick on releasing these products. I don't think they're anywhere near the kind of quality or control of the ethical problems where they need to be. It seems very rushed to me, but that's, try not to inject too much of my personal opinion here. But anyway, you go back like 2010. Google has been working on a variety of different AI programs for a very long time, even before that. But they had publicly released some things like the Deep Dream, the deep Google Deep. Um, it was a neural network artificial intelligence that made really wild images. It was trained on millions of images, and then it would kind of output these strange, like, you'd see a lot of eyeballs and limbs and dogs just kind of like swirling around in weird positions. And so that was a more of the experimental. So it's strange to see, though, just from like 2010 to 2022, this rapid advancement, um, particularly in this type of machine learning that the chatbots are using. Um, is quite interesting. So those two things I think are probably the largest of the contributors. It was the rapid adoption, the ubiquity of ChatGPT. It was fast growing and caught a lot of like kairos media buzz. It became a kind of moment, global moment of human consciousness and interest. And then secondly, the reason why these companies were able to even release these things is because of just they passed this threshold of creating something that was minimally viable. You you input a command, some information, and it outputs something where the user is, say, fooled most of the time. Maybe fooled isn't the right word, but you're impressed slightly by the quality of the output. That was kind of the threshold barrier that programmers in these tech companies had to pass where, oh, like, okay, it's working good enough where we could publicly release this. So that brings us then to like, how do you use these things? And basically they're input output devices. That's the most simple way, the greatest simplification. The user, you, are going to input information. It gets processed. It happens remotely in California or Texas or wherever the big warehouses full of computers are. And then after that processing, the output is sent back to you, via the internet. And then you kind of smile or laugh or are confused by the output that you get from your input. So prompt engineering is just changing your input to get the desired output. That's what prompt engineering is. So say I type something into ChatGPT. I don't like what it spits back out at me. I don't like the output. So then I'm going to change my input to try to get a different result. And then through multiple iterations of doing that, you're engineering your prompt, your input, so that you get the desired output. And the basic recommendation from the technology companies has been this is really, we can critique this too, but what OpenAI recommends publicly, for example, is a couple of things. We give a role, we give contextual information, and we give a genre. And kind of the three basics of prompt engineering: role, contextual information, and a genre. And from those three pieces of information, we can usually we can say with some reliability get decent quality outputs from text generators, from these artificial intelligence text generation chatbots. So what does that look like? It's very simple. You can use simple language. This is true not just of ChatGPT, but also Google's Gemini, which used to be Bard, all of these chatbot large language model text generators. So basically I say, you are a X. X is the role. You are a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized Midwestern healthcare company. A very specific role. Say. That's X. X is the role. And then I'm going to give it some context. I'll say, okay, you are a marketing coordinator at a regional hospital in the Midwest. You are tasked with coming up with content for the weekly health blog. Some more context there, about wellness and medical news or something. More context, the better, based on specifically what you want. So then that's Y. I've given it some context. Then Z, I want to give it a genre. So then I'll say, write a weekly blog post, or write a blog post that summarizes 10 wellness tips that you can integrate into your daily life or something, or I don't know, 3 meal ideas for a healthier breakfast, whatever it is, in the form of a blog post. That's the genre, right? So genre is what is the type of document that you want it to output. And it can do things like lyrics. It can sort of resemble some specific forms of poetry. It can sometimes follow rhyme schemes. It can do technical documents, so in the form of in the genre of a user guide, in the genre of a social media post, in the style of so on. It is quite good at emulating genres and emulating style. So we can ask it to do this. So that was my, what did we say? X, Y, and Z. So we have three basic fundamental components in the prompt that can be written in just plain language. You know, you are a student of writing at the University of Wisconsin Superior. You are an engineer, right? And so based on the role, it might change the tone, it might change the style, it might change. You can play around with that too. So when we get into more advanced prompt engineering, we might realize that okay, um, even though this is what OpenAI recommends, maybe we actually need other information or change the information, or maybe changing the role actually doesn't change the output that much. But this is for the purpose of a starting point of the most fundamental types of prompts that you can start inputting. And so try this. I mean, say um, you are a graduate, you are a recent college graduate. You are going to be applying to positions in computer science at startup companies. Write a cover letter that emphasizes, some specific skill or programming language or what have you, right? Or you are a recent graduate, you're a recent college graduate. Write a cover letter um, applying for a position in technical writing or marketing or what have you, and so on and so on. Use these details. And it'll pretty reliably, the chatbots will pretty reliably produce the genre. It'll be like a 3 or 4, maybe 5 paragraph cover letter, fairly conventional salutation. It might be missing address blocks. So you still need to know quite a bit about the genre that you're hoping to ultimately produce in the end. This is creates, if we're thinking about the writing process, artificial intelligence just creates very basic draft material that you then have to revise and edit and proofread and fact check and everything, right? This is kind of just generating this drafty material. But I think you might be surprised by, say, um, some of the results by using this basic 3 point. It doesn't have to be X, Y, Z, A, B, C, right? 3 point. You give a role, you provide a role in your prompt, in your input, a role, some context, some information, more information, and then you give it a genre. And it can do anything. Bullet points, say um, you want to write a report. I'm writing a report about such and such. You are a scientist at such and such a type of company. You are writing a report summarizing findings from the medical literature or the scientific literature. But then you better check it, right? You better fact check the output, because it can hallucinate. It might totally fabricate information. It might incorrectly cite studies. It might incorrectly interpret studies, completely incorrectly. Um, it might do all kinds of wild, crazy things with information. There's absolutely nothing within these systems to check for truth, to check for factual accuracy. There's no, the best they do is sometimes put a little warning on screen like, hey, not all the information that's output from this program is reliable. But so certainly don't be fooled by it in that sense. And it's not thinking, it's not sentient. It's not conscious. It has no, apparently, it has no reasoning abilities, right? And and I we could go into great length in talking about that. Um, but what we need to say here is just don't take the output at a level where you assume its credibility, right? You must have a high level of scrutinization and really check for potential errors, inaccuracies, biases, completely fabricated information, which we would call a hallucination. But I wanted to keep this on the shorter side. So basically, this is your kind of first step into prompt engineering is try that 3 point model. You can use really conversational language with the chatbots. They're designed to pick up on a variety of different inputs, and the recommendations from the tech companies themselves when you're using these text generation chatbots is to give it a role, give it context, and give it a genre if you want to start getting decent outputs that kind of match your human expectation of what the language should look like. And experiment around, try a bunch of different, you can do things like uh, write a poem, about Taylor Swift in the style of Shakespeare, or write lyrics in the style of Taylor Swift about Shakespeare, right? It can do really anything, emulating these different genres, styles, um, from the professional and technical documents, internal reports, weekly reports, blogs, social media posts. It can integrate hashtags. It's been trained on so much language. I mean, everything from like ancient texts from Plato, who I mentioned earlier, to recent contemporary novels and like billions of pages of text from the internet and social media posts that it can emulate genre, it can emulate voice, and so that's your basic starting point to start fiddling around with entering a prompt into a large language model. Chatbot is with role, context, and genre, and then from there you can fiddle around with, okay, how am I going to get the exact output that I desire by changing the input? There you have prompt engineering. All right, take care, everybody. Have fun and stay sharp, stay critical, of course, because we have to always assess and evaluate and edit the output from these AI tools. Good luck.